Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday afternoon, the U.S. Supreme Court handed the Department of Government Efficiency a massive victory, and so right now, the progressive left is absolutely seething. Now, as many of you know, President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE, led by Elon Musk, has been a cornerstone of the America First agenda aimed at slashing federal waste and fraud in order to better preserve American taxpayer dollars. So far, the Department of Government Efficiency has uncovered over $170 billion in bureaucratic waste, including over $10 billion in foreign aid that doesn't even benefit American taxpayers in the slightest. We're talking about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Madagascar. Absolutely ridiculous. But now, as many of you know, the Democrats have been attempting to weaponize the legal system in order to undermine the Department of Government Efficiency's ongoing efforts to clean up our federal government's budget. To be a little bit more specific, they've effectively been engaging in lawfare against the Department of Government Efficiency, filing dozens of lawsuits and release of information requests, really just anything they can do to slow down and subvert the Department of Government Efficiency's ongoing mission. And for those of you that have been paying attention, this is exactly what the radical progressives do best. Now that they've democratically lost control of the country, they just weaponize the legal system to undermine their political opposition, which is exactly what they've been doing against President Trump as well. But so, folks, now we can get to the good news of the day. But before we do, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. Chief Justice John Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court just issued a temporary stay on the intrusive, radically progressive lower courts in order to protect the Department of Government Efficiency's ability to operate without burdensome interference from the radically progressive activist federal judges. So what this will do is allow the Department of Government Efficiency to continue working away to cut fraud and waste out of the federal government while the Supreme Court continues to deliberate on what exactly to do here. Now, the Trump administration correctly asserts that the Department of Government Efficiency, as a presidential advisory body, is exempt from information access requests, which is absolutely true. Everyone with half a brain knows that the Democrats don't actually care about government transparency. No, they just want to kneecap the America First agenda. But now, folks, take a look at this. You see, there's actually another component to all of this that we need to talk about. Like we said earlier, so far, the Department of Government Efficiency has been able to find over $170 billion worth of waste and fraud within our federal government's budget, and while not all of these cuts need to be congressionally approved, many of them do. That being said, in the recently passed Big Beautiful Budget Bill, the congressional Republicans actually refused to lock in over $9 billion worth of Department of Government Efficiency budget cuts that specifically related to the funding of USAID, NPR, and PBS. And so I hate to say it because there are actually tons of really great components to President Trump's Big Beautiful Budget Bill that we talked about in a video just a couple days ago, but the congressional Republicans' failure to codify the $9 billion worth of DOGE cuts really does undermine the America First agenda's commitment to financial responsibility. And so, very justifiably so, it seems like Elon Musk is actually kind of frustrated or disappointed in the entire process so far. In fact, check this out. Yesterday afternoon, a user on X posted this. I think Elon is realizing that, despite the promises made by the new administration and a Republican-controlled Congress and all of the campaign platforms that they ran on, the current incentive structures and entrenched special interests in the government make it nearly impossible to enact any meaningful long-term changes to address the many big issues we face. So while DOGE will continue to do its thing and do great work, as Elon has said, it seems he's mainly now focusing on using his companies to take matters into his own hands and drive us toward a future of sustainable abundance. All of this to which Elon Musk replied by saying, "Yeah, sigh." So, folks, like I said, right now, it seems like Elon Musk is a little bit disappointed and frustrated with the congressional Republicans because very clearly he takes this stuff very seriously. In fact, take a look at this.
America is also going bankrupt extremely quickly. And and everyone seems to be sort of whistling past the graveyard on this one. You know, the Defense Department budget is a very big budget, okay? It's $1 trillion a year, DoD, Intel, it's $1 trillion. And interest payments on the national debt just exceeded the Defense Department budget. They're over $1 trillion a year, just in interest, and rising. We're adding $1 trillion to our debt, which our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay somehow every 3 months. And then soon it's going to be every 2 months, and then every month. And then the only thing we'll be able to pay is interest. And if this is, it's just, it's just like a person at scale that has racked up too much credit card debt, and this does not have a good ending. And so we have to reduce the spending.
And you know what, folks? Everything he just said is 100% true. All of the waste and fraud within the federal government is a very serious issue. But so it seems that because many of these problems within our federal government are, at least for the time being, entrenched and unchangeable, now Elon Musk is at least in part refocusing on solving many of our nation's biggest problems by means of working through the private sector. Now, this doesn't mean that the Department of Government Efficiency is shutting down or anything like that. In fact, the majority of the waste and fraud that the Department of Government Efficiency has found so far can actually be cut without congressional approval. But the fact remains, when the US Supreme Court and Elon Musk, a private citizen, have done more to cut waste and fraud out of our federal budget than the congressional Republicans, we do have a serious problem. However, regardless, the America First agenda is still moving along, and the Supreme Court just absolutely smacked down yet another radically progressive attempt at lawfare. Generally speaking, ever since President Trump got back into office, the progressives have been racking up loss after loss in the Supreme Court, seriously shutting down the degree to which they can weaponize the federal judiciary. And while not every single problem has been resolved yet, so far we're honestly off to a pretty good start. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my humble opinion, that is what it looks like to put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.